I'm going to kick us off. So welcome everyone to the Nymbl AI webinar. Excited to share some content with you today, and we have a pretty focused agenda around, of course, what AI looks like, in particular around AI agents. I'm going to be introducing our speakers in a moment, but to give people a sense of timing for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be setting the stage a bit through some context, like things that we feel will help shape the demos and sort of the basics of what you need to know about agentic AI and recap some of those definitions. Also emphasize some of the patterns that we're seeing as we are delivering these types of solutions to our customer base. And then in true Nymbl fashion, we're going to be going into three demos today. We're actually going to be showing three different technology platforms. So one will be Moveworks that we'll start with an HR agent built on full stack, and then I'll wrap us up with a warranty agent built on Retool. As we're going through the webinar today, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and then we'll either answer them live or at least towards the end. So introducing some of our speakers, I know if you've been on a Nymbl webinar before, you would have met myself, Martyn Mason, the CEO and co-founder of Nymbl, and also Zack Barrett, who's demonstrated with some of our clients different solutions and AI solutions on different platforms, also joined with us. And then introducing Andros Haggins with us today, our AI engineer that some of our clients have worked with on different AI-focused projects, and he's going to be showcasing the full stack component here. All right, so as far as some of the context and general setup, when we're talking about AI, most of our clients that we work with are familiar with generative. So this is what you see when you're interfacing with ChatGPT. A lot of the point solutions like HubSpot, Salesforce, SAP are building in generative capabilities into the interfaces and the screens that you're familiar with, which is really great for productivity. And some of the differences that we see on the enterprise level have more to do with the data in those point solutions. From a more marketing or content creation point of view, there's other products out there that are really specialized in certain types of media, whether it's presentations, videos, images, and so on. So this is a fairly, established or maturing category. When it comes to building solutions for companies, we do see three other subsets under enterprise AI. A common one being enterprise search. So this is that chat GPT or chat-like experience that has integration to your specific data sources, and it figures out security and what that user is allowed to see. So generically called enterprise search, also known as retrieval augmented generation. And there's some work behind this to get those integrations set up, and a lot to do with security and corporate fencing and all that. There's also document AI, which is a common pattern that we're noticing where we're using, I'll say the next generation of OCR, a little more intelligent, where you're reading semi-structured documents, like think purchase orders, invoices, where you're expecting a certain set of data to be read on a document, and then that data gets moved into an application or database, and that triggers some downstream workflows. So we're generically calling that document AI. And then, so today's focus is going to be around agentic AI. So this is using agents to help with an existing or really rethink existing business workflows. We're going to show you three examples today across the different platforms. It's going to be a balance of understanding, the use case and how we did the development, and then, some of the, best practices that we're establishing as we go through our delivery process. So one of the things that we often notice when we're designing in an agentic system or even just a solution in general is that there's a tendency to sort of shortcut to the actual technology solution. So, hey, let's build an agent that does all this stuff. And what you can't take lightly are all the processes that come before that. So you still have to understand like what good looks like today and what the happy path sort of would be established, and get those requirements from the humans that are living and breathing that current process to date. So that's some of the heavy lifting or the hard work that we've optimized in terms of our intake process, just to understand, how is it being done today? Let's iterate and make that, better. And then on the other end, you've got data. So being able to understand what data sources need to be provided to the agent, the quality of the data in those sources, and just the general readiness, even context of what does a customer mean, active customer and active material mean, to the agent, how that gets defined with sort of a business glossary. So you have to do these two things, and we can help there, but before you really start to see the value, of any agent that you develop in your workflow. And sometimes it might not even be an agent. You're going to hear us talk about an AI workflow. It could be just an application. It could just be, a workflow that calls an LLM. Um, but it's nice to see, from a business side that you do have an additional viable solution, and that's what we're observing, as we design some of our newer solutions lately. So another notable part of developing these agentic use cases is the interfaces that the end users get exposed to. So, many people are used to an application. So you might have a CRUD or a dashboard, and inside there could be a chatbot, or you just might trigger an agent through a button. You have your chatbot interface. So think of Slack or Teams where you might ask a question that bot has access, to the agentic capability to call up certain data, whether it's in SharePoint or Google or even to a relational data system. And then you also have scheduled or ambient or sometimes background agents that are just triggered off events in the data itself. You don't necessarily need a user to, initiate the agent action. It might be polling or observing, data coming in externally or through a system of record. So these agent interfaces then lead you to the capability of, what an agent does. So now we're getting down to, some of the basics. I know there's like a lot of detail that we could get into, but what is an agent here? So through these interfaces, you're going to have when you construct an agent, you're going to have instructions that call a large language model. We find it's best practice to set up an agent to work with one large language model. There's some optionality that we may consider, but you essentially have a one-to-one mapping to a large language model. You wrap instructions around that, and those instructions are system level prompts. And then below that, you have tools that don't really have a sequence. You're just saying to this agent, these are the tools that you can use to complete a goal. So in the instructions, you would define your goal, you'd have some guardrails, but even within the tool, you could have further guardrails, more descriptions, more context. And then there's different types of tools. There's a lot, we could debate on categories or subcategories. But the key thing is it has to take an action. Like, an agent that's just returning data is more of an advisor. An agent that has an action to do something, whether it's update a system, and typically that's where the enterprises see the most values are updating something in a system of record, or it's retrieving additional information to facilitate that action. It might be interacting with sub agents and they have access to different systems or different security. And then you have general like communication, like email notifications, so there's these different tools that enable the agent to complete, what would formerly be part of a human workflow, that gets enhanced and modified here. On the bottom, it's just notable that inside an enterprise, like the data is the big thing. So an agent that doesn't have access to any systems of record is not that useful to an enterprise. So you have to really sort out what systems, are do a sort of a system inventory and what that system means to the agent in terms of, what it can and can't access or update. So another distinction here is we're going to be showing like a combination of these examples. So an agent has instructions with tools. You don't need to define the different steps. You give it the tools and the agent will reason and figure it out. Whereas workflows, we've seen a lot of agent use cases that may end up being more of a workflow where one of these steps is calling AI or a large language model, but as a developer, you still have to construct the steps and sort of anticipate the inputs, outputs, and everything in between. So the development effort on the left is significantly less, whereas workflows still are very powerful, but you do have to think through, many different permutations, and you might kind of morph these workflows into an agent if you have the proper requirements and data understanding. All right, so that's enough kind of context from me. I'm going to hand over to Zach to take us through the first demo here, on the Slackbot use case.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Perfect. Let me slideshow here. Awesome. So yes, what I'm going to be going through is the Moveworks Marble agent. So we call ours Marble. You can call yours anything that you want. But what I'll show today is kind of a combination of a couple of things that Martyn discussed already. So we have enterprise search. So being able to ingest documents from SharePoint, Google Drive, Box, wherever you may have them, to being able to search those and query those with specific agentic queries. So an agent can query multiple times to find and choose what documents might be the best ones to serve back to you. It also has the ability to determine, okay, should I use a tool to go out to a completely separate system? For example, being able to give it access to our time and entry system. So we'll go through kind of what that looks like. But first, I wanted to run through what our discovery process looks like when we're looking at this type of agent or this type of process, right? And we go through discovery phases, which Martyn was discussing. It's the ability to essentially take what is going on today, looking at your current process and not analyzing it, see what's working, and figuring out if the process is, good. Do we need to change it? Is there any recommendations to change it, or are we good? And let's figure out what nodes or processes this workflow goes through in order to build these into tools for the agent. And most of the time, your pain points you're going to have is there's so many requests. One person is getting overloaded. It may distract people from doing their main job, or employees just constantly don't know where something is, right? And a lot of the times, whenever you're using this type of agent, the best case scenario is that I'm already in Slack or I'm already in Teams. How do I get information out of this company breadth of information? If and so I don't have to go message my manager or my manager's manager or just HR or anyone and take them out of their day-to-day job. And so we map out your process. Okay, this is what everything goes through. Okay, in order to do this, we need to make every one of these a tool for the agent to be able to call. And maybe that's getting approval from someone else. And that may send them a quick Slack message. All you have to do is click approve, right? And from there, we go through, we actually design the conversation. We say, okay, this is exactly what we're expecting. Now, this could go 8 different ways, but just kind of showcases what the possibility is in order to get this information or get this action taken for this process. So we'll walk through that. We'll make sure it all makes sense, and then essentially start building out the tools for this agent to have this capability. At the end of the day, you'll have kind of an agent map. So you'll have this middle agent with all of its tools, and each one of these will have instructions or descriptions about them, and you'll be able to see kind of a full web of what your agent can do. All right, perfect. So let's dive into the demo here real quick. Quickly, I wanted to showcase what Moveworks kind of is and how we work with this inside of Moveworks. You'll notice here that we build multiple different plugins and tools. Each one of these has a conversational trigger. So how do we trigger it? It doesn't have to be exact. It essentially training the Moveworks agent to understand why it should trigger this tool. So getting a better and more rich description. We then go into building the actual actions and activities and determining the slots, what information it needs to pull, and what data it needs to ask for before it can actually run this tool. And then at the end of the day, how does it connect out? What does it do? How does it connect to a different system? Where does that system send? How does it send it? All of that kind of third-party connection. All right, perfect. So let's get into actual Slack here. And this is our Marble bot. Like I said, we are running the Moveworks agent here indirectly in our Slack. So here I could say, find or can you share with me some details on the Crane Tech Quarter application? We recently built a cool application for one of our clients, and we have some documentation about that inside of our system. And I really want to understand, kind of what we did, because I may be talking to them here later today. And so I can see all the different details about that overview of the Crane Tech. It's going to essentially go through that document, understand it, give me a brief overview, but then it also links me to this conversation where I can go into this and actually see this document directly and click view the source. And that's going to bring me directly to this document. So it's a full end-to-end, get me directly to the documents and pieces of information that I need. Another piece of this is not just giving us information or from a SharePoint, but maybe I want to say, what is my PTO looking like. So we've been able to pull together all of our details about our PTO and system and everything that's pulling all of that information in. And it's now going to get my PTO balance for this year and showcase how much PTO I have remaining for the day or for the year. Looks like I need to take vacation because I have 18 more days remaining. And lastly, I'm going to ask it, what does my guidance look like for this month? So this is something we get all the time. Our consultants are constantly having to look at guidance. Guidance is essentially how many hours we have associated with a project for this month, right? So we kind of guide our consultants that way. And this is something you have to check on a daily or monthly basis to do that. So here I can see it's actually a human in the loop. So it's confirming first day of the month you want this guidance for. So I'm going to say 5, 10, 1, which is fine. And it's going to give me back this information. It may not be working for October as we just moved in, but it's giving me this guidance here to allow me to understand, okay, it looks like I have 29 hours in the managers and about 10 hours at Shazami. And so I know that that's where I need to put my time for this month. So that's just a few tools that we give access to for our system. And, this is just scratching the surface to what the Moveworks bot can do. Perfect. So I will hand it off to Andros for the HR agent.
Thank you, Zach. So I'm going to go over an HR agent now built in full stack. Um, Hiring is a very time-consuming process. It takes multiple steps. You have to review a bunch of information, and then decide if, this person is a match to your business. Um, and sometimes when you're hiring, you're going to want to look for criteria that is specific to your business. So a general use case is going to be a little bit difficult to do. So now we can build a custom agent and bake it into an application. So what does an agent look like? Ooh. An agent essentially just looks like a central focus point with some tools to call. And we're not going to go too deep into these tools because I'm going to get into the actual fun part, which is a demo of the agent in an actual full stack application. So we're going to pay attention to these two users. Right now, they're not hired, and we haven't really done anything with them. So I'm going to start with myself. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me if I want to upload a resume, which I do. And it already has all of my information, the position that I want to be hired for, my name, my email, that came from that initial flow. So we're just going to send this. And you'll see that the agent starts thinking. It's going to decide, well, the first thing I probably need to do is parse a resume, which I would say is accurate. You'd probably want to check the resume. We then see it decided to research me. So it did a web search on everything that it could find about me. So we could have more context about this specific candidate. And it's then going to classify me and decide, should we accept, which thankfully its opinion is that I should be accepted to be hired. So I'm going to decide I do agree with the agent and I'm going to approve this, but I could reject the agent. So the agent doesn't decide, it just advises me. So we're going to approve. And when we approve somebody, we can now decide, okay, what tools does this person need when they're onboarded? Maybe they need a Slack invitation, GitHub, Google Workspace. We can have all of that set up. And one thing I want to call out here is that this could have been automated. We could have approved this person and all of these things get set up. So I'm not going to do the standard flow. I'm going to tell it no. Actually, I don't want to give this person everything. I only need IAM and let's say Google Workspace and let's provision me that. So we'll see that it starts giving me access to these things. And then it lets me know that it's done and I can view the candidate profile. So now I get a view of this candidate, pretty much an overview of everything that we've done. My status is hired. Um, Here's some information from my resume, and then all the skills from my resume, and then everything that was provisioned. I can see what passwords were given. Um, and I can see exactly what systems I was given. So let's go back and let's do another candidate. And this person is for a project manager. So let's upload him. Do the same. Well, and it should probably decide to parse the resume again, which it looks like it did. It's going to do the same research about this candidate, and then its final step is going to be classifying. And once it gets done with deciding if I should be classifying, it's then going to make a decision, which is just creating that resume that you saw in the candidate profile. And this person, I don't like him, so I'm going to reject him. So now we get this customized email. And in here, I could just send this email as is. This could be a standard template. But I mean, overall, he didn't do too bad. So let's tell it to make this email more warm. All right, so it's thinking, and then we're going to see it get updated here in a bit. Cool. Yeah, this seems about right to me. It thanks me for the project manager position. I don't want to put hiring team though. I do want it to be coming from me. So we're just going to edit the email and then we'll send. And then finally, it takes us back to where we could do another candidate. And we do see that that person was not hired. Um, and a lot of these steps could be automated. We just kind of showed you how the agent works, but this could have been done with simple button presses. So that's the HR agent, and I'm going to pass it over to Martyn to show you the warranty agent.
Thanks, Andros. Just as a reminder too, feel free to ask questions on the Q&A. See some are trickling in, which is great. Um, and just so it was clear, you saw an example of the chatbot interface through Slack from Zack. He was interacting with a file system in one example. So there is work to be done to make sure your file systems are ready, which is sort of the less fun stuff of building AI. But it is a recommended exercise to get your files in order. So that's what we call data readiness or just knowledge management. And then he also was accessing a custom time management system as well to get those guidance requests and those PTO requests. So that was a relational database. So within a single familiar interface, one of the reasons we see a lot of adoption with Moveworks is because people are used to interacting through chat, whether it's Slack or Teams, and then they're able to get access to very, powerful capabilities through the agents from there. And then Andros was showing a really great combination of where we think the future of enterprise software looks like is you've got CRUD applications with chats and AI working behind it, and you're able to interact and do things like change the email header or see, a grid of statuses and be able to, modify those statuses in an app, but then have a chat-like interface to help, speed up the workflow or facilitate the business workflow. I know there's a difference between a business workflow and AI workflow there, and that was a really great example of that. And I know our HR team is chomping at the bit to get that app and live and more rolled out across different modules. All right, so let me showcase a demo here. Before I get into the demo, I do want to sort of set the stage, like how do we gather our requirements? So a lot of our clients are used to seeing some of these assets. We've kind of polished this particular use case up for this webinar, but the idea is that we always start with a big picture view, so what we call a solution overview, and this will identify the main user groups of this solution. So you have customers that took the back up a little bit. So this is a retail company that's got a lifetime warranty, and they have people visiting their website, making a claim on the warranty. So they want to return a product and, take advantage of the lifetime warranty. So the two main user groups are the customers that are making the claim against the warranty, and then you have customer service reps on the right that will review, those claims and then approve or issue credits. And all that needs to end up living in a point of sale system so that when a customer goes to any store, they're getting, that credit and they can like buy more stuff or have a partial credit there. So the storefront information is also tracked to the customer where they can see the status of a claim. So what we end up doing is after we come up with a bigger picture solution overview, then we start drilling into the next level of requirements and saying, like, what do customers really, what are the steps they'll do inside the solution? So they'll submit claims, view status, get refunds. And then what does the CSR need to do? And then how does the admin team fit into this? So you're starting to get into the second level of detail. Each one of these boxes will have supporting user stories underneath it. And then those stories end up being part of our development and testing process. The next thing is getting the data right. So this is what we call a business data model. So it's the business terms for all the things that are involved in the solution. So you have customers that make claims, that issue credits, CSRs approve credits, but each one of these squares, which is essentially a table, exists in a system. So it could be a point of sale system or the warranty management system in this case. Knowing where this data lives as a system of record is important for one to understand the big picture view, but then that information eventually needs to be made available to an agent because these are very clean names, but in your systems of record, it might be a little more technical or abbreviated. So this is a necessary exercise, simplified one, of course. And then you get into a workflow mindset, right? So now you've got, let's take a happy path, like one that's very simple, and then you can obviously expand there as you get into some of your edge cases. This is the existing workflow without AI. And you can see in the orange, this is what the CSR does today. And then in the green is what the customer does. And these are the different steps that happen, right? So this is the interaction with the business team to say, what is the most common scenario for making a claim against a warranty? And then you start to say, okay, based off what you've shared, here are the opportunities for the agent to help. And while this has a sequence to it, we know in reality that when the customer does this interaction, it's not going to be in this perfect sequence. So the agent is going to allow the developer to say, this is the goal. These are the things you need to do. But anything outside of the sequence may change. And then it's got a reason and plan to eventually get to the credit or work with the customer to provide more information. What you'll notice here is at the end, the CSR is still in the loop. So you might not want the agent to just issue the credit because that's obviously financial impact. So they have a lighter workload, but they can scale out. And let's say, 70% of their workload is now with the agent. It doesn't change too much with the customer, but the customer is going to get better response time, 24/7 response time, because they're interacting with an agent. They can get pretty far until the actual credit needs to happen. So this is part of what we'll do. Like we'll start with simple, and then we'll get into the workflow, and then we'll understand the different steps. And then the development happens where we need to say, all right, I got to add a claim, add a transaction, add a status, and this is all the technical details to support that. All right, so now let's do a live demo here. So for the fellow developers on the call, before I show the actual chat here, I will show a bit of the configuration so I'm in the Retool platform. This is their agent builder. And when we talked about the instructions or the system level prompts, you're going to see that right here, right? So this is human readable instructions. This is where the guardrails are set. This is where we give the goal. And below the instructions, you'll see where we set the model. So this is what I meant by every agent gets, kind of tagged to one model. If I do want to change that, I can see the different vendors here and swap them out. But it makes it a little easier to support and manage when you say, all right, this agent is going to work with this model. You may have a sub agent working with a different model that's good at a different thing, right? So that's where tools come in. Tools have these different in this case, it's a communication tool. You have the ability to send an email. You have more of these technical steps where I'm adding through an API a warranty claim. You have a transaction, you have a status, and then you have an email reply. One of the more powerful things about these low-code platforms is the ability to quickly add tools. So if I want to hit add tool here, you can see these libraries of tools that I have access to, or I can use things like an MCP server. I can call another agent. So there's a lot of capability to a developer to add tools to an agent, therefore making the agent, more capable to complete its goal. You can also add context to a tool itself. So in this case, this is a description. You can set parameters. So this is kind of like a guardrail. These are only the things you should be asking for. And then if you really want to get into more of a visual low-code style builder, then you can see, what is actually happening at the database level in this case. So when you're building these types of enterprise solutions, there is a balance of the technical capability, but this is the right balance of being able to guide the agent, get access to, in this case, to a custom application and to set the guardrails and the goals. All right, so I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to start so let's pretend that I am a customer. Say I want to return some socks. Okay. All right, so imagine this being on a website. I'm doing it, native just here in Retool for the demonstration. But this interaction, could be wrapped into your website or even via email or via a text message. Okay, so now it knows. Okay, what I'm asking for. So it needs follow-up information. So I'm going to give it my name. I'm going to I have to know the sock, so black hiking socks. I'm going to try to mess this up a little bit by giving it some bad data. I'm going to say what's wrong with it, and then I'm going to provide an email address. Um, okay, so hitting this submit here. What we like a lot about Retool is you're going to see the steps it's taking, and there's a little more transparency to the data that's going on behind the scenes here. So it's thinking at the moment. I'm sure I threw it off with my funny spelling here, but you can see the email process is coming up here. It's this is what it's reasoning or planning, right? So this is what the playback is, and now this is what it's returning to the user. I can see the data points on the right, and I'm just going to approve this. It sent me an email, so let's go to my email here. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. There we go. So here we go. So there's my email. So I'm just going to say yes here. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm basically acknowledging I received the email, and I could have said no, and that would have triggered another flow there. And now what it's doing is you can see it using more of these other tools that we provided it. So this is it's sending the information into the claim table in this case. You know, I might choose to not show this information to the end user, but just for the demo, it's nice to see. You can see it running into an error here. Okay. So it might ask me, or it's probably, yeah, it's going to fix it itself. In some cases, it might ask me for clarity and say, did you really mean that type of sock? So now it's made that warranty claim here. Um, so now I can go back to my email and then um, see the next email here. All right. So so this is essentially to complete the flow. I would take this and go into the store with that barcode. To show you, to show you what the CSR would have done, I'm sort of just flowing through this chat interface, but to showcase like what an app at the CSR level would look like, you could have a warranty management system app like this, more like a CRUD database, and you can see the recent one that was approved via email here that's coming through, and then all the different steps on the bottom. So this is just a view at the data level, more of a like an app UI, and you can make edits here, and then you can add notes, and then we can enable the chat history on the bottom to showcase here. So this is kind of the CSR view. Well, this is the CSR view, and then the other end would be the end user that's making the requests against the warranty. So this is the type of stuff that we see with a lot of retool use cases where you need an app to help finish the workflow, encourage that human in the loop mindset, collect additional information from an internal user, and then make very clear like buttons or approval steps right to the user to finish out this warranty claim system. All right. So timing wise, we are tracking well. And so just to wrap us up here, I think one of the advantages of working with Nymbl is that you get to see a lot of different platform flavors. So you saw Moveworks, full stack. You saw, of course, Retool. I'm going to get to some of the questions in a moment here. We one of the reasons we do these steps is because then we want to ensure we're recommending the right technology stack. And sometimes, a lot of times, the influence is what you may have already. Other times, it could be, a really strong platform that you should think about introducing to your technology teams that might solve, one specific business need or a few business needs. All right, so let's get to some of the answers here. So maybe the first one sorry, the questions. The first one looks like, could you run a check process across a whole group of applicants as they come in? Andros, I'm gonna say probably yes. I know we did it step by step there, but you could sort of mass review applicants, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. That's another point going back to Martin's slide with like scheduled. As soon as a applicant comes in, you could just have it automatically do all those processes that you saw, and then maybe you just see the candidate view where you accept or reject at the end.
Yep. Okay. Um, so the tech stack question that was probably around what Andros was showing. So, um, the funny thing about that app is we use agents to build that agent flow, and that tech stack is React, Python, and I don't even think we hooked up a database because we probably didn't need to for that use case. But that's when we say full stack, that's essentially, like coding languages that maybe there's a preference, maybe you prefer Angular, but in this case, we're showing React Python. Python is sort of one of the stronger ways to set up, some of that logic or interact with some of the AI capabilities. Yeah, I guess Andros, anything to add to that tech stack there that you showed? You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly right. It was just Python and React, but it could have been built in any language, and we did use coding agents to help build that out. And for the large language models, we did use OpenAI and Gemini. That might be the only thing that I would want to add.
Okay. Yep. All right. How does Nimble approach scaling agentic AI across multiple workflows or departments without creating siloed agents? So I don't think a siloed agent is necessarily a bad thing. Like what is a challenge often is siloed data, especially if you're replicating data just to like meet the requirement. But you do want your agents to have, a limited scope. And even when you do have more complex multi-agent systems, you're going to have an agent orchestrator that will then be able to interface or work with some of the sub agents. We found, and we might just be having too much fun with naming agents, but we have found like giving certain agents a purpose, like Marbles, like our HR agent, Colpio is our CRM agent. Like, of course, there's a little bit of like remembering, but it is kind of nice to see like how those agents work, in terms of their limited scope. Theoretically, yes, you could have something like Moveworks that does a lot, but there are times where it might make sense to say maybe based off security or use case to give, a different name to your bot or your agent. Um,
Yeah.
so there,
Yeah.
yeah,
We
Zach,
find
anything
that,
out there?
yeah, we find that between like 5 and 10 tools is usually the best. Most of the time, think about an agent the same way you would think about an employee, is if you have an employee trying to do 15 different things all at once, or you have them, the capability to do all these 15 things and they're not specific to their one job, then they are going to get overwhelmed and not know, okay, which button or which lever should I pull. So the more siloed you can actually make an agent, the better. And just having multiple agents that interact with each other is a better use of agents with that orchestrator and even orchestrators on top of orchestrators. It just flows better that way.
Yeah, you often hear people say like think of agents as maybe like a really really smart intern, right? You still, to Zach's point, might only want to give it so many tools, but to have it so that you're able to say like this is your goal and your focus and sort of think about it at the agent level is helpful to support those systems. Because if you just have one giant agent doing way too much, then that's when you start to see hallucination and like more guardrails needing to be set up. Um, I saw a question in your team's opinion, which elements you found to be best aligned with enterprise needs and security requirements. So have a slide for that. There's like enterprise is mostly what we're seeing on the left-hand side, and we're calling this more experimental on the right-hand side. I'm sure there's a case that these LLMs would make that they could go enterprise, but these are the ones that we're battle testing in real enterprise use cases. And then even within these different categories, you might have certain models be better at general purpose or RAG or creating code. So, but the thing is, like the slide I'm showing you now, 6 months from now, will probably be very different. So there is a constant research or staying on top of, which is what we're doing across, all of Nimble to say, this is the one that's really good at code generation. This is really good at taking documents and extracting information from those documents. So it's hard to stay on top of this. We're doing it because we've got all the different patterns and we can leverage that information. But they're sort of leapfrogging each other in different use cases, quite a bit.
Yeah. And one direction we normally take is most companies have either Azure or AWS, and each one of these has their own LLMs within inside of them. So it's completely separate from the actual company of OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic. So we're using, Azure OpenAI or AWS Bedrock or Google's version of Vertex AI, which hosts a couple of models as well. And all of these are SOC 2 and HIPAA compliant. So we normally pull their documentation, hand that over to our clients so that they have it for their internal security teams, and even do our own write-up on it as well.
Yep. Maybe either Zach or Andros, can you answer, I think it's a Mon's question. Like what can we do to prevent agents from hallucinating or taking
Yeah.
incorrect actions?
Yeah, well, most of the time you're specifically giving it tools with specific inputs. One of the things that in the beginning of agents, everyone wanted to just kind of say, okay, put this agent on top of my database and just let it go and do whatever it wants, right? And one that's just giving it essentially an infinite amount of tools, and it doesn't know what to do. It's too much information, and it doesn't work out that way the best. And so one of the guardrails that you put into place is one of them that you actually saw in the warranty app, where you give it inputs. Okay, email, person name, product ID sometimes. And then you give it, okay, now you can go and look up the products and use your naming and use fuzzy searching. And it can find the product ID, it can insert that in, but it always has to put in these inputs. It cannot ever generate SQL on its own. There's an abstraction layer to the SQL so that it can't inject SQL into it. And so there's essentially ways to confirm that a tool is being ran the way that we want it to run before, without just letting it go wild on its own.
I think to add on to that, the second question sort of leads into, I don't want to say like hallucination, but the data structure. The data structures are very important. And there's sort of two paths of data improvement. One is like your relational data. And oftentimes we see our clients, they want to, implement an AI scenario or AI use case, but they have a lot of really important data in spreadsheets. And just feeding spreadsheets to an LLM to then pick up and run a process is going to be quite ineffective. So getting the relational process around that through an application is commonly a step one. And that's what we see with low code app development. And then once you have, things standardized and you got your business glossary, then you can start to feed that, higher quality data into, an AI scenario or AI use case. So there's sort of like the relational system level track, and then you've got the knowledge or unstructured level data where, let's say you have like a PTO policy and you just, dump your PTO policies into SharePoint, but you don't tell that, what's approved, what's not approved, what's dated, and you don't have like a naming convention or a file folder structure that will help guide the agent in terms of what's quality. People may then perceive that it's hallucinating when actually it's referencing a PTO policy that does exist. It just lives right next to the one that's more updated, and no one's kind of flagged or tagged that one as outdated. Over time, we will expect AI to get better and know like, oh, this is from 2021. I found one for 2025. It might be able to return that, but still having quality folder structures, naming conventions really helps with, reduce the quote unquote hallucinations or inaccurate data that might come from just having, too much unstructured. Um, what's the best balance between automation and human oversight? Yeah, that's a kind of a hard one. I think the way that gets answered is through that process I was showing, where we understand the big picture, we understand the users involved, the current human user groups. We go through the workflows, and then it might some cases like we have a lot of healthcare use cases. 50% of that is still human in the loop, and maybe we only replace one or two steps with AI. Financial services, they don't like they want more deterministic flows, in finance. So they're not really looking for something that the answer is gonna change depending on when you ask the question. So that clarity comes through the requirements gathering process. It's hard to say like a flat balance, but that balance typically is consistent inside an industry, we found. A lot of good questions coming in. Which
Have
one?
you guys encountered any limitations with context windows or some enterprise systems like SAP? Good question. The context windows are definitely something that can be an issue. Most of the agents that we've built or use have a memory system, and they normally summarize that memory once it gets to a certain length so that it's constantly being pushed down. In each session, you're able to learn a little bit about each session and create like essentially knowledge base entries, but Each session is kind of their own, so you're never constantly adding to this context window. But um, the specifics around SAP and just like gathering data and all that type of stuff, it really comes into how you want to interact with SAP. If you're saying, "Hey, go grab me 1 million records and deduce the information from that," you're not really going to get great results either way. So the best is actually just being able to create a query or create the inputs to a query, giving that back and allowing the application to run that instead of the agent itself and putting all of that into its context.
All right. So we're right at time here. We will send the recording out. Obviously, you can get access to if you use that QR code. We'll also share a link to this presentation. Um, and yeah, we appreciate everyone joining and all the great questions. And thank you to Andros and Zach for prepping the content. And we're looking forward to the next one.